So I want you to consider this when we're talking about this new infant government that's just been formed. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett is to the right of Netanyahu politically. But think about this. He only has one coalition partner. Remember I said there were 8. He only has one coalition partner who supports his position. And that's the New Hope Party led by Gideon Czar. So you can talk, hey, I'm right and I'm going to do this, but if the majority of your government is against or doesn't really agree with, not necessarily 100% against, but doesn't necessarily agree with what you're trying to do, it's going to be very hard to get your edicts moved forward, right? So he's going to be sandwiched between a United States president who opposes his policies on the Israeli-Palestinian track and the opposition of many of his coalition partners. This is what he's going to deal with starting today. It's in the news right now. And that's one of the key takeaways from this new government is that he doesn't have very much support even within his own government. Normally in a, let's say a Republican administration that comes in, President Trump, he's going to want to have all Republicans. And then in a Democrat administration, Joe Biden, he's going to get rid of everybody that Trump had, and now he's going to have his entire. That's not the way it's done in Israel. These guys could not get a majority as one party that got a majority in the election. So what they have to do is they have to get at least 60 votes. This was voted on. They won. They formed a coalition and were voted on 60 to 59 in the Israeli Knesset. The Arab faction of Ram abstained. So it allowed them to be elected as this coalition to form a government. So, but they couldn't, none of them got 60 or 61 votes. So what they have to do at that point, they have to start forming a coalition. Prime Minister Netanyahu could not form a coalition. Well, then it goes to the president. The president says, okay, let's see. Who has the best chance of forming a coalition? He gave it to Netanyahu. Netanyahu couldn't do it because he couldn't get everybody on board with him. These guys were bound and determined to unseat Netanyahu so nobody would get on board with him. Well, Naftali Bennett, then it went to Yair Lapid. Yair Lapid said, okay, I'm going to form a coalition. He went around everybody. He got enough people together and formed a coalition. It got voted on yesterday, and now they have a government. So Naftali Bennett is the acting prime minister now, and then it's going to go to Lapid. I think it's after 2 or 2.5 years. Well, unlike Netanyahu, who has known Biden for, 4 decades, he cannot immediately isolate him. But Netanyahu has set the bar really fairly low when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian track. And now it remains to be seen if he's going to find a way, if Naftali Bennett will find a way to hold on to his principles, even with a government that doesn't stand totally with him. Think about that. And imagine if President Trump came in and his Secretary of State was not along with him. President Trump would say, okay, well, that's what happened. I can't remember the guy's name. It was the Tillerson, I think. He was from here in Texas. Donald Trump found out he wasn't on board, and he said, I'm getting rid of you. Well, Naftali Bennett necessarily can't do that because he formed this coalition. And so he's really in between a rock and a hard place. I mean, he's going to have to find a way. We'll have to see if he can hold on to his principles that he's talked about during the campaign and everything without isolating the United States and his coalition partners on more than one issue, especially the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Iran, that's going to be consistent tension points in Jerusalem and with Washington. Because, this Washington administration, Joe Biden, they've got their own ambitions, they've got their own agendas they want to push, and they say they're pro-Israel, and they are somewhat, but they're also pro-world government. So you've got the international community and the United Nations, which is anti-Semitic, And Joe Biden is trying to straddle the fence here. And so, man, the news is just full of this stuff. So this is what we'll be watching very closely in the weeks and months ahead. How is this? Will this lead to, will Naftali Bennett crumble under the pressure and allow them to form an Israeli-Palestinian state? We know that's what's going to happen according to Bible prophecy. Will it be under this infant government? I don't know that at this point. It's something we have to watch. It's a total different dynamic than Prime Minister Netanyahu. You understand the dynamics here? 8 different parties. The Jerusalem Post, they reported that Benedict's first 4 events, the first 4 crisis areas under fire, there are going to be tests on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So most of major news sources understand, listen, Naftali Bennett, you talked a big talk, but can you walk the walk when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? This is the 2 things, the Israel-Palestinian conflict and Iran. What's the 2 major prophecies that are next to occur on God's prophetic timeline? A peace agreement between the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the 6th trumpet war, World War III. These are the 2 conflicts that Naftali Bennett is sitting there staring at him right in the face. Beyond the United States and his coalition government, these 2 things are facing Israel right now in the eyes of the international community. So the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's the most contentious and diverse arena for this coalition, period. And issues relating to it they're expected to be one of its weakest links because, well, it's precisely here on the Israeli-Palestinian front that this new coalition is going to be tested both within the first weeks and months in 4 ways. You've got the Evyatar outpost evacuation. You got this flag march, which they said today it's going to go ahead and go on. You've got the Palestinian evictions in Jerusalem, which Hamas used that as a catalyst to start launching rockets into Israel. And there are 4 existing land issues now, but these 4 families were the reason they started firing rockets into Israel, okay? And because Palestinians wasn't allowed to go up and pray on the Temple Mount or something like that. But imagine, it's going to get it's a lot worse than that in the next few months. There are 4 existing land issues in Jerusalem that could lead to the evictions of not 4 families, but thousands of Palestinians from their homes in 3 East Jerusalem neighborhoods. Imagine. This is staring Naftali Bennett right in the face, everybody. This new infant coalition. The one that captured the media attention and that of Hamas last month was the fate of the families in Sheikh Jarrah, that neighborhood. The High Court of Justice has yet to decide whether to weigh in on the matter or to allow the evictions to move forward. No date has been set for that decision. But dates do exist for additional cases. That's just one. The Attorney General is expected by the end of June to issue an opinion on a land case in Siwan's Bataan, Ahwaya, which is, and that can impact at least 700 Palestinians. And there's another land case regarding Al-Bastan in Siwan that could impact more than 1,000 Palestinians. That's been delayed now until August. And then there's like 13 families that could be in danger of losing their homes, irrespective of the ruling, because they fall under the dictates of the Khameneit's law, which blocks them from seeking any additional legal recourse. So this one Palestinian family was already given a notice last week that they had 21 days to destroy half of their home. Otherwise, the municipality would move to knock down that portion of his abode. So it's a demotion that could equally spark violence and the pending evictions that neighborhoods have been under intentional scrutiny. And then finally, the issue pending evictions in the Walaha neighborhood of East Jerusalem that's also due back at the in court on June 21st. What's that, next week? The right has viewed each of these cases as land issues. And the ones in Al-Bustan had the Wallaha evolve municipal plans for parks. And the cases in Sheikh Jarrah and Batan al-Hawa, they are involving property disputes between Palestinians and Jews. So, but they are seen within the larger context of this Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and they're placed within the prism of the battle for sovereignty in Jerusalem. This is what I like to step out of this and look at the big picture. And think of being a day-old Israeli government, and think of being the prime minister with a coalition of individuals that do not agree with you having to face this. How would you handle that? And with the United States looking down looking over your shoulder, and with the international community looking over your shoulder, and the European Union looking over your shoulder, and the Palestinians ready to go to war at any point. And you're Naftali Bennett, prime minister, newly prime minister one day, and you're looking at all of this. And outgoing prime minister Netanyahu said, Naftali Bennett, you're going to crumble under the pressure, my friend. Now, this is where we're at today in Israel. And it's so bad that, like I said, major news sources in Israel have no clue which way they're going to go, because there's so many in this coalition. So with the left and the Palestinians believing that the evictions are an empty, or I should say an attempt to, by the city to seize control of Palestinian neighborhoods for Jewish projects and residents, it's a real mess. I mean, the neighborhood battles have sparked these tensions and violence with European Union and the U.S. weighing in on behalf of the Palestinians. I mean, it's like, what are you guys, well, I know what they're thinking. They have that globalist mindset. Hamas has also threatened violence as a result of this, which they just did a couple weeks ago. You can see, and the issue of Sheikh Jarrah in particular was one of the sparks that led to May's violence. Then, of course, there's Gaza. That's a huge problem. Naftali Bennett is going to have to deal with this as well. I mean, there's pressure points all over. The Israeli Defense Forces and Hamas, that 11-day war that ended on May 21. But it's unclear if the calm is just a lull in the war or it's the end of this round of violence, really. I mean, Hamas was already renewed its threat of more rocket fire with regard to the flag march, and there exists this real chance that it could make good on that threat. And Bennett and Lapid's coalition could be in the position in its first week of deciding whether and how to retaliate should that happen. I mean, it would mark the first time that Israel would have a coalition with divergent views on how to handle Hamas rockets. Think about that. With an Arab faction in your government. All of these issues have to be dealt with by the Bennett government, with the possibility that the failure to find a satisfactory response could lead to renewed violence. Will he be able to withstand the pressure in the face of everybody against him?
As soon as you say end time, they say, whoa, the end of the world. When's it going to be? And you can see this mask of fear. I'm not telling you the end time is coming. I'm telling you, you live in it right now. Daniel chapter number 7, verse number 4. The first beast was like a lion. We have the eagle used continually to depict the United States of America. You see it on governmental We are the generation for which these that you will not miss one segment of understanding end time, because I've had many people tell me it's changed their life forever. Many of the major prophecies of the Bible are given to us 2, 3, some of them as high as 4 or 5 times. There is not any chance it's not going to happen, because it's in your Bible, it's prophesied, and the prophecies always coming back.
Now, it actually gets crazier than what I just talked about, everybody. The Israel National News reported. Now, I told you that there was an Arab faction in the Israeli government. A lot of people don't know that. But there is an Arab individual. His name is Mansour Abbas, and he's going to have a voice. He was one of the ones that allowed them, they got him on board to be able to form this coalition. They needed X amount of votes, and they got it with Mansour. I want to call him Mahmoud Abbas. It's not the leader of the Palestinian Authority, okay? His name is Mansour Abbas, and he's going to be in this government with Naftali Bennett. Well, how do you think, what do you think his mindset is concerning the Palestinians out in the West Bank? You think he's just going to leave them out and go along with the Israeli government? Absolutely not. In a speech before his swearing in, he's the Ra'am leader. He vowed to reclaim the expropriated lands that have been politically taken away from them. So you know exactly, he has spoken plainly. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to take back land that was politically taken from us, the Palestinians. So it's the United Arab List, or Ra'am, the leader, Mansour Abbas. He's the Arab faction in the new government, and he will have a voice, I promise you. Imagine if he bailed. There would go the government, right? I mean, he stated that we will reclaim lands that were expropriated from our people, and this is a national cause of the first degree. Now, he said that. Now, get this. He's in the Israeli Knesset. Abbas said that in Arabic in his speech before the Knesset plenum yesterday evening. But then he switched to Hebrew. Now, understand the dynamics here. Imagine if somebody was in our speaking to the Senate and spoke in English, but then began to speak in Arabic, gave a message, and then went back to English. What would you think? Well, Abbas spoke in Arabic, and then he's speaking in the Israeli Knesset, so then he switches to Hebrew for the end of his speech. And at that point, he said, well, we all come from very diplomatically, we all come from different nations, different religions, different sectors. And there is one thing that connects all citizens of Israel, and that is citizenship. And so you're sitting there in the Knesset, they're scratching their head going, hold on a second. I want to know what he said when he was speaking in Arabic. What would you do? It's the exact same thing I'd be thinking. Well, Abbas rejected claims from the right that the incoming government had sold the south of Israel to his party. He said, nobody sold the south to Ra'am. It remains in the state of Israel. So he's being very diplomatic. The citizens of the south are citizens of the state of Israel. There's a disagreement about the ownership of the lands. This happens in all modern countries and that deal with situations like this. So when he's speaking in Hebrew, everything sounds wonderful. In Arabic, I'm taking back lands that have been expropriated from my people. Well, a religious Zionist party chief, Bezalel Smotrich, you've heard about him, he's all over the news. he responded to Abbas's comments, and he said this. He said, so, Abbas is once again putting on a spectacular show of hypocrisy with a nationalistic speech in Arabic in which he says the truth, a speech full of soothing words in Hebrew, then, intended for the Jewish listeners who are blind and deaf, especially those who make themselves so. So, if you're sitting back looking at this Israeli government and you think, I wonder which way they're going to go. Nobody knows. Carolyn Glick, I mean, some of the major writers for the major news sources in Israel, they're asking the question. You can go look at them. Which way will the government go? We don't have a clue. What kind of government are we getting? They don't know, because they understand the pressure from everybody that's going to be on Naftali Bennett. How will he react to the pressure? And from the outside, and also how will he react from the pressure within his own government? Now, they've got their goal. They've passed their agenda. They have unseated Netanyahu. He's on his way out. Now, what's Israel going to do? Well, back to Mansour Abbas. He clarified. He said, these are my boundaries. So now he's member of Knesset, Mansour Abbas, and he said that if decisions are made, listen at this statement. He said, because they got him in the government to get Netanyahu out. They were grasping for straws. They got Abbas in, but he's clarifying his statements. But listen at this very closely. Mansour Abbas said that if decisions are made that run counter to Islam, his party will resign from the government. Now, you want to know, that's craziness. To be in Israel, and Naftali Bennett is going to try to get agendas pushed, that his ideas he wants to get pushed, but he's got a guy saying, hey, if you do anything counter to Islam, I'm out. In Israel. So in an interview with the Panetco Il website and the Hala TV channel, Abbas said that member of Knesset Saeed Al-Karumi was absent from the vote on the approval of the government in coordination with us. And he stressed that the party is united under Abbas's leadership. And he added that in the first meeting with Prime Minister Naftali Bennett that will take place this week, he intends to raise the issue of home demolitions in the Negev desert in order to change the policy from demolition to planning and construction. And got to listen to, I'm quoting this, you guys, from this Mansour Abbas, this Arab faction in the new government. He said, this government was established based on our will, and we will influence it at every moment. His Arab faction, we will influence this government at every moment. Today, we have proven that the Arab community is a strong player in the political arena in Israel. He clarified this government is dependent on us and our decision, and if there is a decision that contradicts our national principles and our religion, we will not be there. So he was asked if he intended to overthrow the government, and Abbas said, get this, we will act responsibly and not childishly. So there you have it. There's my report on the one-day-old new Israeli government. So, does that leave us with a few questions? Oh man, does it? What about the two-state solution? What about the religious faction in Israel? You know that Prime Minister Netanyahu always had the ultra-religious in his court. And they were pushing things like the transit trains running on the Sabbath. Didn't do that. But under this new coalition, I think I read where they're going to push for the trains to run on the Sabbath. You say, well, what's the big deal with that? Well, you're talking about moving towards religious or away. And where things nowadays don't become, maybe to a lot of these people in the government, the two-state solution, they think, well, maybe that may not be so bad. And they may be able to be pushed. You understand that these, Naphtali Bennett, I read where he is the third generation from the forming of Israel. So you've got, you had like Menachem Begin and their generation. Then you had Netanyahu and their generation. Now you got these younger guys coming in. I think Naphtali Bennett is like in his early 40s. And they're coming in. They have different ideologies on things. Now, I've also read where Bennett is to the right of Netanyahu, but he's going to feel immense pressure to buckle and to compromise, even within his own government. You just heard it from Mansour Abbas. So there's a lot of questions on the table. The Israeli-Palestinian, when the international community comes in to this infant government and said, two-state solution and maybe an embassy for the Palestinians in Jerusalem. I mean, these are things that Naphtali Bennett is going to face immediately. How will his government react to all of this? Well, I'm looking at this from a biblical prophetic aspect. We know the Bible says there's going to be a two-state solution created. The Jews living out there in many of the settlements will be allowed to live out there as a Jewish minority in those settlements, under Palestinian jurisdiction. I've got articles that say many of them are willing to do that. That seems crazy to me, but a lot of them have said that. Netanyahu was also willing to do that. Bennett has said no. But, again, you can see the immense pressure that will come from all sides on him, even within his government, folks. So will he buckle and get a peace agreement signed? I cannot answer that question. I promise you I will be reading everything I can get my hands on to that end over the next few weeks and months. Because if they get a peace agreement signed, this is why I started my program with this. If they get a peace agreement signed with those characteristics, the prophesied characteristics of the peace agreement that starts the final 7 years, folks, we're going to be off into it. And then right around that time, there's going to be a sixth trumpet war. How will Bennett and Gantz and Yair Lapid and Abbas, who's Arab, how will they deal with Iran getting a nuclear weapon, which President Biden of the United States is wanting to go ahead and sign the United States back into another JCPOA, a Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Will that lead to World War III? These are the next two things that are on God's prophetic timeline. Now we have a brand new government that they don't even agree with each other. How will they stand against Iran, the international community, against the United States, when Abbas, the Arab faction over Ram, has actually said, if they do anything anti-Islam, I'm out. So there's my report on the new Israeli government. There's so many angles to look at this, but I'm looking at it from the prophetic perspective because I'm looking forward to seeing Jesus splitting them clouds before very long. And I know that there's going to be a peace agreement and there's going to be a sixth trumpet war. That peace agreement, if it has those characteristics, starts that final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. I will keep you up to date. Myself, Doug, Vince, End Time Ministries, our team will keep you up to date on everything happening from a biblical prophetic perspective with this infant Israeli government with Naphtali Bennett. Folks, keep Israel in your prayers because there's a lot of people over there that absolutely do not agree with what's going on. So keep them in your prayers throughout the end time. I want to say God bless each and every one of you, and thank you for joining me today on End of the Age.